Hey everybody, welcome to Marketing Trends. It's your host, Jeremy Bergeron. I am so excited and honored that we have Detria Williamson, the Chief Marketing Officer at IDEO, on the show today. It's happening. Detria, how are you?
Jeremy, today I'm on with you, my debut on a podcast with a rock star like you. I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
Super. I love it. Anytime, I get to have anyone really on the show, I'm super excited. But there are people like yourself who have a really cool story that's still being written. This career path you've had, this experience you've had working with some iconic brands, leading some really cool teams, no doubt, seeing marketing from a lot of different perspectives. And so, like, you specifically are one human that I'm excited to dive in on. I just want to know from the beginning, like before we go anywhere, where did it start for you? Like, what was the genesis of marketing for Detria Williamson?
Well, so I've got two parts to that answer. First, I haven't only lived abroad most of my life, but I've grown up most of my life abroad. So I spent most of my time in Germany. I studied abroad in Argentina, also in Paraguay. And so I kind of grew up with this fascination of watching people, understanding how people live. I don't think I inherently knew at that time that was sort of ripe for a career in marketing, being fascinated with people and culture, but that served me well. And the second part is, potentially embarrassing, but guess what? You get to have it first, which is I graduated with straight A's from high school, thought I was going to be a doctor as a first generation kid going to college. My parents were like, well, you get to be a doctor or a lawyer. And went to Pepperdine, go Waves. I was a cheerleader there. And basically got a C with the free tutor that I had on campus. And I was like, this is not looking good. So I quickly sort of changed my path. And to be honest, advertising was the only class at the time that was still available for me to fulfill a prerequisite. And I took it and I did really well. So there you go.
Wow.
Out of failure came my marketing career.
I love it. Well, were there any particular brands back then, because I know people are going to Google you and check out where you've worked, and we can talk about some of that. But were there any kind of brands that when you kind of started to tune your attention towards this marketing world that caught your eye? Because now clearly at the helm of IDEO, where design is really important and really thoughtful design is really important, were there specific ones that you remember back then that kind of got you?
I would say all the brands we know and love got me. That would be Nike. That would be Apple. Hallmark. I still write handwritten cards, so I loved Hallmark. I loved their commercials back in the day, and so watch out for your card, your handwritten one. I'm going old school.
I love it. Okay, cool. So it's been said that IDEO was a brand, and working there was a position that you had your eye on even before your time at Accenture, where you worked. First off, can you tell us a little bit about some of the digital transformation aspects you were working on during your time at Accenture and some of those kind of same tools and things you carried over to IDEO?
Sure. I primarily went to Accenture to actually get my hands dirty, if you will, even though it was at a very senior level from a digital technology standpoint, because I found myself basically purchasing and leading all these huge multi-million-dollar RFPs for companies where I was leading their brand transformation. And I felt like I was losing groundswell in terms of really understanding what I was buying. So I went to Accenture to really master my skills of, how to be agile, how to use technology in, the most, I would say, innovative ways, really being on the cusp of what technology could drive. So while I was at Accenture, I would say it was very intentional to go there. I would say that the probably most well-known digital tool that I created while I was there is called Inclusive Customer Experience. was really, it really fell out of design, a design thinking workshop that we were doing. So again, design thinking, has always been this kind of throughway savior, I would say, to my career. It's like it's a safety net. And the reason I had always had my eye on IDEO is because I felt like it was this kind of secret society to get into. And I thought, well, how do we open this up? I wish I could just knock on the door to that brand and say, you got to open up. You're doing this incredible work. How do we unleash the world getting to know, to sort of become more familiar with all this incredible work and impact you're having?
Okay, so you brought it up before I could. I was going to ask you about this really cool thing that you've been credited with, which is called inclusive customer experience. And I love all those words put together. But I want to know a little bit for our audience, kind of how that came about. Like, how are you implementing this idea of inclusive customer experience? And then kind of how are you able to build off of that?
Sure. So again, it really arrived out of humans, people coming together through a design thinking workshop where the question was, how might we be more inclusive? All the brands were coming to us, and going back to my childhood where I'm always infatuated with kind of watching people, their behaviors, things they're doing. And I thought, I think, I don't know that we're really asking the question in the right way, because the answer was always to sort of basically solve for your internal culture. And I feel like everyone was doing that. But I think the loophole, and where I found there to be a lot of just emptiness in terms of performance, in terms of brands and hitting their inclusion targets, were two things. One was that everyone was focused on diversity, which obviously is a key focus. But I do believe that diversity can be engineered, but inclusion can't. So companies were doing a really good job of sort of engineering diversity, and they've probably been working on that for decades. I don't think focusing on diversity for great companies is new, but how do you transition that to being inclusive? And it was being missed, one, from an internal perspective, but certainly from a customer perspective, which is why you have so many brands, really the past decade kind of cornering themselves in terms of providing these experiences which are alienated and not inclusive. So I decided at that time, really what the market needs is a tool that helps them to be inclusive end to end. So how do you design for inclusion, not necessarily limiting it to only your culture? Because I don't believe that you can just hire your way through the problem, because that sort of straps back to diversity being engineered.
So how can brands begin to think about this idea of designing for inclusion, especially those that are maybe even going through? A lot of times we have CMOs who are about to go into a rebrand, or they just finished a rebrand, or they're in the middle of a rebrand, right? And I think this is important to maybe note for some of those folks.
Well, first, this sounds really simple, but there are so many CMOs that don't have the luxury, the privilege, or sometimes it's even the awareness to have design built into their budgets. So when you say design for inclusion, that requires intention, requires you to allocate resource, financial resource, team resource behind it. But what you gain from it is beyond imagine, but really it gives you the safety net that you need so that what you're designing for, you actually end up having. So I think having a more inclusive brand and a more inclusive experience has to be designed for. So the answer might seem really simple, but it really is making sure that you're doing that in an intentional way, and making sure that you have a design partner, which to me, the best design partner in the world is IDEO.
Yeah, I mean, look, it's a brand. I know for me, I spent a few years at Google and working at some other cool brands, and IDEO was a brand that I always heard about. I never engaged with, but I just knew when it came to design, I'm like, you think IDEO. It's like design, IDEO. Yep, all day. And on that note, I'm curious kind of from your words and perspective here, because IDEO props itself up as this global design company, right? But what does that really mean in your words as CMO of that brand?
Well, it's interesting actually to really zero in and focus on what you said. Design, or IDEO in and of itself in the design space, has this halo. So our upper funnel is fantastic. But in terms of people really recognizing us as a global company, in terms of people understanding the sort of broad, how broad design services are that we actually provide in terms of, sustainable design, designing for transformation, designing for government change, designing for impact. Just like you said, so many people, they think design, they think IDEO, but they either don't know how to get to us, or they don't quite know the type of design that we do. So this is a lot of the focus as CMO, is really focusing on that new design buyer, particularly CMOs. Our agenda, the scroll of our agenda, like just keeps rolling. And you need a design partner, again, as your sort of safety net for designing for inclusion, designing for growth. I mean, I was just talking to a CMO the other day about designing for privacy. All of those things, when they're designed for, one, the intention there, particularly working with IDEO, is always done from a human perspective. And I think that's clutch now for marketers going into the next century.
What kind of challenges does it present, having, over 23 different creative services across industries? I always find it interesting. And, IDEO is a big brand, almost 1,000 employees, globally. And if you look at the stuff that IDEO is doing, you're going to see there's tons of offerings in design. There's this really broad sweeping palette, as you just mentioned. But that also can be probably challenging, right? Because it's like, how do you give all of them the right attention, and present that to the world in a way that's appetizing, given that there's so much choice and design is commoditized in a lot of ways. What are the challenges that come with that? Having such a broad palette of offering, sweeping industries, and how do you even navigate that as CMO? What are you kind of focusing on to make that more simple for folks?
That's such an amazing question, especially because it's something that I feel like, as a marketing team at IDEO, I have a fabulous marketing team, we grapple with. One, just working within an organization where you're working with these, incredibly creative human beings, meaning, our designers, our community of designers, they are our secret sauce. And you get into a room with them and they are so dynamic, so ambitious, and you need to sustain that in order to take on the impact that the world needs. So first, I think it's marketing, just being able to tap into that and to be able to sort of simplify what you have as this global collection of incredible designers. It's a huge task to take on that we're working harder on, I would say, on an ongoing basis. Then when you look at the sort of conventional marketing tactics of how do you make sure that we do actually spread our message across industry, I think what's kept us whole is really staying focused on the impact that we want to drive. So for example, if that's transformation, if that's circular economy, if that's shifting people's value systems as we look to save our planet, those are things that actually hold and don't discriminate against industry. So I think what we've really worked hard at from a marketing team is to make sure that we hold true to the impact that we want to have. Otherwise, it's so easy for us to get lost, because you're right, we do a ton of impact work across lots of different industries. We do everything from, product design, our sort of ability to be makers is second to none, all the way through to experience design and working on transformation with some partners that we've worked with for a decade or two. And it's pretty vast. So it can be a huge undertaking from a marketing perspective.
What does your current marketing mix look like now? Like, what channels are you seeing success in? Where are you kind of experimenting? Maybe been some surprises along the way.
Well, our upper funnel is pretty incredible. So I would say, as a marketer, it's a privilege when you come in, especially with a brand our size, where the upper funnel is still quite healthy without really doing some of the, I would say, more modern kind of digital marketing that you need to do. So we are moving more into search, for example, which the company, IDEO, we've typically not done search in the past. So imagine we've maintained, I would say, pole
Wow.
position from a
Yeah.
design thinking perspective. But I came in and I looked and I was like, where's the budget line for search? So I would say that's one thing. Again, sounds simple, but for IDEO, that's a place that we have to go to, just in terms of sort of staying tidy and not allowing others to kind of tap into our equity.
Wow, that's huge. What else besides search that maybe were there any other surprising channels that came up, or maybe ones that weren't being utilized as much as they could have been?
Well, if you look at, I would say our content, again, we have thousands, it's literally thousands of impact stories. And even working at other great places that I've been before do not have the sort of treasure chest of use cases and case studies and work that IDEO has done. So really the new thing that we're doing right now is really exploring content in new ways,
Hmm.
really making sure that we're on the outer edge of offerings that we know that Google and Facebook have, for example, that are things that we haven't done in the past. So really making sure, something that I've spoken to sort of a cohort of CMOs about is, you know, before the pandemic, we would all talk about journeys and we would write these journeys, but I think it has to be more active now. IDEO can be a partner in that, in terms of journeying. How do you make sure that you're journeying with your customer? And that really switches how you create plans to journey. So that's a big shift that we've made, because
Hmm.
it makes it more active, what you have to do every day from a marketing perspective.
One of my favorite questions of any CMO is, what did you do your first 90 days in the role? And I've heard some really interesting answers from some all-time greats, and I love hearing what people chose to do, because when you enter an organization like IDEO, like other brands, there's a couple of paths you can take as CMO. And I'm not saying that I know this is the best one, but I've heard some really interesting ones. You are one, Detria, that I want to know. What did you do your first 90 days? What did that look like? What are the things you established? What are some of the priorities for you?
So the first 90 days, in true, I would say, IDEO style, was deeply listening. And I have to say that it was so different. Other places, to your point, it's like first 90 days, you show up or you get cut out, So at IDEO, it was like, they basically asked, we really need you to be a deep listener. And that's what I did. So I would say making sure that we established who our communities were, so that we weren't only doing the deep listening internally, but that we were doing the deep listening in terms of who are our future recruits as a community, doing deep listening in terms of our potential new clients. And I would say we're pretty clutch in terms of having relationships at the CEO level. Thank you, CEOs, for that. But the new design buyer, and you said it yourself, they're CMOs, they're CIOs, they're CTOs, they're chief diversity officers. So we really needed to make sure that we were expanding our listening ability in terms of, sort of making sure that our services were known to other leaders across the C-suite. So articulating all of our communities and deeply listening internally and across all those communities. That's what I did my first 90 days. And I was so thankful to be paid for that.
Yeah. And honestly, I mean, look, a couple things I want to comment on that. One, that is the answer that I do start to hear more and more is CMOs that come in and they just do nothing but listen. They just stop. Marissa Mayer is an example of one. When she joined Yahoo, took over as CEO, she got a lot of flack because she didn't do anything at first, right? She just listened. She just was talking to people and figuring out what's going on. And she didn't come in with this huge strategic plan and start making these. She just waited, and there's been folks I've had on that have said the same thing. Kevin Warren, CMO of UPS, an amazing CMO. I asked him the same question. He said listening. And so it's really important to see folks like yourself on the executive leadership team at the helm of some really awesome brands when you have access to a lot of, virtually unlimited creativity and support, and you decide to wait, you decide to stop and decide to listen, so much so that not only listening to what's happening now, you're listening for the future too. And so that's paid off clearly because you're coming up on your first year, in your role as CMO, which is huge. CMO is either you come into, either rebrand, or reorg or retire. Right. And
That's right.
so better than anyone else that it's a full contact sport being the CMO. And so congratulations for making that move, for listening, and I think cultivating that is really powerful as you grow and expand, because this isn't it for you, but it's cool to see that you played that card. So well done.
Thank
cool.
you. It didn't come without any bruises, though. I would say I was a deep but active listener with a few bruises along the way.
Yeah, that's incredible. I'm curious about if any kind of campaigns, projects you did work on in these first kind of 8 months there, stuff that you can talk about that was really cool that you had a hand in, or just being a part of supporting the team that was creating that. Anything stick up? Because there's been some famous things that IDEO has done with Apple and some big brands in the past, but any more recent things that you're really proud of?
Well, I can talk about this, and this will maybe this will make you laugh, but I can't believe, you would not believe the infatuation in the shopping cart. I mean, it's a case study that is still top of mind for business schools. So I would love to come in with the agenda of like, what is our new shopping cart case study? Because we have so much incredible, impactful work, but the world is still infatuated with the shopping cart. So I just have to tell you, it just is like a campaign that keeps giving and giving. So the shopping cart is still there. I think something that we do really well, though, that you can look forward to seeing, hearing more about, is these questions that we ask, questions that either come to us or questions that we help reframe for people. They're big. They're driving the world forward, driving the world into different places, helping companies really transform. And they usually don't come to us with small questions. They come to us with big questions. So I would say be on the lookout for that.
Wow. I love that. And that's got to give you, as a marketing leader, really cool perspective, because you're now getting to see and shape and support the vision of some iconic brands, also some up and coming brands. And so that just gives you such perspective. And I think with your time at Accenture as well, I mean, of course, Accenture and some of these awesome in the big 4 and 5, it gives you so much perspective of, and you now are at the top of the design world. And so you said something, I think, in an earlier interview, and I wanted to ask you about it, kind of the next level of it, which is kind of, how do you navigate the world of oversimplification and commoditization of design, right? It seems to be here, where it's here now. What do you do about it now?
I feel like you have to open up to it as a really, my foundation is as a content marketer, and we've seen content become commoditized. We've seen content become democratized. We're seeing the same trend in design. But I think, entities such as IDEO, again, we're in pole position for really knowing how to do it. We build up the design muscle. We build up the design fluency. So I think it's just making sure that you're present. So I'm always talking about the new design buyer. I myself, I'm a scrappy, self-taught designer. I didn't have the privilege of going to one of these great schools. I'm so honored that I get to learn right under the helm of David Kelly. But, I didn't get to go to Stanford D School. And I feel like the world responds in that same way. People know that IDEO is where it's at, either IDEO, any of the other brands that we have. People know that we're the trusted partner. We know what we're doing. And so I don't really see it shifting in terms of the services that we provide. There are some entities, some clients, big clients that you and I both probably know and love, that come to us and they do ask, we want you to build up our design fluency, culture, gravitas internally. That's what they want us to do. There's not a lot of design partners you can go to that can do that. You know, you can go to some firms, they can come, they can do the 6 week, the 8 week kind of design thinking quick workshop. We can do that. We can do that with our eyes closed. But we're also really a partner there through this shift in democratized design, through this shift of commoditized design, because I think IDEO is the partner to really build up, I would say, the next sort of class of global design citizens.
Mm. Where where should modern CMOs really be focusing on when it comes to design and thinking about their brands? Look, we get a lot of the Fortune 100, 500, Global 2000 on our show. It's always interesting to see some of the things they're doing from a brand perspective and how they're evolving. But a lot of these leaders will listen to this conversation and be thinking, how can I be thinking about design and really being thoughtful about it as a modern day CMO?
So only because it's you, and we've already decided that it's a love fest on this show. So I'm going to give some free advice. Here we go. Three things from a design perspective. One is designing for inclusion. Two is designing for privacy. And three is designing for experience. I think CMOs have to do that. And I would almost throw a fourth one in there, which is designing for growth. So the sort of old school way of thinking of design is only the way in. As CMOs' agendas continue to just spiral out of control, designing with intention across those four areas that we're constantly hit with and just can't, again, you can't hire your way through it. I don't think that that's the only or the quickest or most agile way to solve for CMOs answering to those big challenges. I would say designing your way through them is the way forward. There's my free advice.
I love it. I love it. Tell me about this amazing badass team that you have as well, because clearly there's some amazing human beings that are all around you at IDEO, and I'm curious just if you could touch on why are they so amazing and maybe a story or two, because I want to know about this badass team.
They are incredible, and I would say bad. I have to say ASS because I have kids.
Got it.
Whoop 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 for the single moms. Even though I don't know, my kids probably curse. They're probably laughing, but I mean, based on the playlist I see on their iPods, I'm sure they're cursing. So the reason I have such an incredible team and have had incredible teams in the past, but especially now, I have an incredibly diverse team, incredibly diverse. And I would say diverse in all caps, not just looking at diversity in terms of gender, diversity in terms of ethnicity. Those to me are table stakes. And when you hire radically inclusive leaders, those things just happen. They should happen automatically. But diversity in terms of, how they gain their skills. If you go and you actually recruit everybody out of San Francisco that's grown up the same way, that's come out of the same type of household, that's had the same track through, the UC schools, no knock against UC schools or the schools there, you're probably going to get people that approach a problem, that come day to day with the same sort of approach. They come with the same stories, the same way they attack problems. I sort of radically and relentlessly seek out teams that are different. And my team is incredible because they are all so different, incredibly skilled. No one has the same background. And therefore, when you put us all around the table, it is a freaking feast of greatness. It is so great. It's so good what we bring. And I'm so incredibly proud of the team that I have. So shout out to the IDEO global brand marketing team.
I love that feast of greatness. That is something I'm going to use in my repertoire now. Thank you for giving me that one. I'll steal that from you.
Okay, you got
I
it.
love that.
You can have it.
I love that. That's great. Truly incredible. Something that I like to sometimes, I'll ask about on this show is is confidence. There's a lot of study and research out there in terms of confidence of the CMO. And if you're not confident, you're not going to take chances. You're not going to be bold. You're not going to be yourself, right? And so there's this kind of second guessing that can happen. So I think it's really important for leaders to really ensure that they have their own trust and confidence and others have it as well. And I'm just curious about this for you. How do you build it and how do you help others build it? Because I don't think we explored enough. And I certainly think you're someone, if I look at, the piece of paper that tells me your career, which is all the things that you've done, this is something that you've had to build to get to where you are. And I'd love your thoughts on that.
That is such an awesome question. I would love us to you and I, let's commit to having a part two. One, because IDEO is really a shepherd of creative confidence. We talk about that being the need for companies to actually take a brave step forward. So we can let's you and I riff and wrap on creative confidence.
I love it.
As a part two. But confidence, you're right. CMOs right now, I think, the bowling pin ball game where there's the little magnetic bowling, the pins that you roll and they just pop back up. CMOs we are constantly hit now, especially I would say since the pandemic. And if you are not a brave leader, if you're not a confident leader, one, your teams are just going to unravel at a rapid pace. So I would say it's more like maintaining your confidence. And in order to do that, you have to stay inspired. Sometimes you have to seek that inspiration outside of the, 20 Zoom calls. I maintain making sure that I am reading articles, listening to your podcast, for example, just to stay inspired. You have to stay inspired and stay nourished because our agendas are wicked. They're just crazy. So that's one thing. It sounds, again, really simple, but if you want to sort of stay confident, then you have to stay nourished. You have to stay inspired in order to maintain and sustain inspiration to your teams. They require CMOs to do that. I think CMOs are inherently brave and confident. Otherwise, you just, you'll get eaten alive with this job. So I would say, back in the day, though, I wish I was a CMO like 20 years ago, though, because that's when we were all sitting around the table looking at in situ shots of, bus boards and things like that. So those days are long gone.
Yeah. When times were good. Yeah.
When times were good. So I would say staying inspired, staying nourished is really important in terms of maintaining your confidence. And then the second is that, if you don't have the rest of your colleagues, the rest of your C-suite, the rest of, the people all around you, if they are not fully on board with journeying with you, it's going to be a rough place to stay confident. Because we are constantly questioned and challenged, and we're also brought new challenges. So it's, generally the things that CMOs are attacking today are unprecedented. There's no playbook for it. And ding, ding, ding. This is where design comes in.
Exactly.
This has been my secret clutch to my career, really has been being afforded and having had CEOs and CMOs that I've even worked for in the past that believe in design.
I love that. Talk a little bit about sales and marketing alignment. And, it's something that will be a topic, I think, for as long as there is something called sales and marketing, there'll be something to talk about. How do you approach aligning sales and marketing now being the CMO, especially at IDEO, where I think it's a really special brand? You've had other marketing leadership roles in the past, and I know you've dealt with this in various ways, but kind of what's your take on how to best do it, how you're doing it now, maybe lessons learned, just overall kind of opinion on that. I'd love to hear it.
I wish it was a longer answer, but it's simple. And I don't know, maybe it's funny. That used to be this long debate, right? Knowing marketing and sales, and to your point, how do you align it? And
yeah,
you had to go in with all the bells and whistles. But now the answer is really simple. It's called MarTech. I mean, the MarTech stack brings it all together. tells the story, removes anything that's anecdotal, I would say. It's all right there. So I would say make sure that your infrastructure is in place so that you can use MarTech to really align sales and marketing. And it doesn't matter if you are a company of, 20 or a company of 200,000. There's a stack out there for every size company, and MarTech is really the answer to aligning. I mean, now it's also legal, right? You've got GDPR, and again, 10 years ago, I wasn't sitting with the chief legal officer. So the MarTech stack brings all of that together now. There's so many awesome software platforms and tools.
There's a what is it, a graphic, there's a graphic going around the internet with a MarTech like tree matrix of like the million MarTech solutions. I mean, it's so vast. And I'm curious, and there's some great ones, like we're evaluating some for our company as well. And like there's some great ones,
Okay.
and there's so many of them. And you could literally be trying a new one out every week if you wanted. How do you deal with that? Because there's a lot of innovation happening in MarTech. I mean, we're getting data on folks that are, visiting our website down to where they're located and what company they work for and what they're, I mean, we're getting all this intelligence that we never had before. And it seems like every week there's something new and cool popping in that world. And it's important in your role to have that information too. How do you navigate that? Because it is cool. MarTech's awesome. It's needed. And there's so much of it. And there's so much intelligence that you could be looking at, especially in your role across lots of different industries.
Well, I think first it's making sure that you have all the tools in place and meeting the brand that you're working for where they are. So, for example, at IDEO, the same approach, and I've also advised others of this, that investing in sort of the Bentley MarTech stack, but then you don't have the content budget, then you don't have the people to analyze all the data. I would say it's like you have this fancy car, but you don't have anybody to drive it. So where we are right now is actually just making sure that we maintain. I mean, IDEO actually has a really healthy MarTech stack. Again, being at an innovation company, it's hard because we like all the shiny stuff. We're the ones that say, yeah, we'll try it. But, I'm usually there to say, okay, we could try it, but, let's make sure that we've got the content, the production, the people to actually sort of see it through. And if you don't, then I think you kind of put it on the shelf until you are able to do that. I also think as there's new software platforms, to your point, there's so many. I call it the spaghetti stack. It's like,
Yeah,
there's so much out
exactly.
there, but I think when you are trying to make that choice, it's really important to make sure that you have the support that you need from the new software tools. Make sure that you have that through line, especially I would say for smaller mid-sized companies, because sometimes the shiny one comes, they've got really attractive offer, but then you might not have the support that you need to really see it through. So yeah.
You mentioned content a couple times, and I'm curious about how much of the focus there is on creating content for IDEO, original content, how you look at that. It's a world that we play in with our studio all the time. Brands come to us and say, we need original content. You have access to a lot of really cool perspective on design and content and what's really hot and what's not. But what's your kind of approach to that? Some brands I've noticed are focusing more on the content side of things. Others have a slice of it in their budget, and that's really it. Where does IDEO, and kind of how do you think around just content and content marketing and playing in that game?
Well, coming from, brands like ESPN, Discovery, I can't help but I'm always going to be the one wearing the content flag and pushing to like push the budget three times, no matter where I am. So I would say that holds true. The great thing again though about IDEO is that we don't actually have to work hard for that content. It's there. Our designers are so amazing. Our clients are incredible. The problems that we're tackling and solving. So thankfully, this is probably the first time, and it was a surprise that the content's there. If anything, it's about how, as a marketing team, we can keep up with, again, sort of making sure that story is told and heard, particularly externally, but the content's there. So excited about that.
What does the next era of design look like?
I definitely, you touched on this a bit. I think there's a new design buyer. I think, you know, generations that are following us, I think design is going to be a mindset that they pull into their day-to-day lives. I think it'll sort of surpass again just something that sits as this kind of secret sauce for a CEO. I really think that design is fit for purpose for the world. And it doesn't really matter, hopefully, which is what IDEO is doing, is making design accessible around the world, no matter where you are.
Love it. Cool. So we got about 10 minutes left to the top of the hour. You've killed it, by the way, so far. So congrats on that. You crushed it.
Thank you. Got a great partner.
Yes. I'm here for it. Is there anything that you want to make sure we touch on that we didn't touch on? Are you cool if we just go to the lightning round and we can wrap it? Or if the stuff you want to talk about, let's do that. We can go there too.
I mean, I think you asked some really powerful questions. I feel really good, and we've already agreed that we're great partners. So if I forgot something, I'm gonna call you up.
That's right. We got it. We're connected now. So okay, cool. Well, let's do the lightning round, and then we can wrap, and we'll give you some time back. But you've been awesome. So thanks.
Thank you. Okay.
Thanks for being on the show, Detria. This has been incredible. Someone like yourself has such cool perspective and experience into design thinking, but at brands around the world. And it's just such a privilege and an honor to sit with you today, to get a little bit into kind of how you think about branding. And you dropped the mic so many times today. I wish I had that drop the mic button. Drop the mic, because you just shared some really insightful things. Thanks for being on the show. You rocked it. We will do a part 2. We'd love to have you back.
Thank you, Jeremy. You've also been amazing, you and your team. And like I said, I didn't binge out on Netflix last week. I binged out on you. So I'm like,
nice.
Super. Yeah, there you go.
Cool. I appreciate the love, definitely. And yeah, it was such an honor. And again, we'll definitely do a round 2.
Awesome.
So, okay, let's jump into the lightning round real quick. Marketing Trends Podcast is brought to you by Salesforce. Salesforce brings marketing and engagement together. Learn more at salesforce.com/marketing. Detria Williamson, Chief Marketing Officer at IDEO. Are you ready for the lightning round?
I'm going to go for it. Let's see.
Let's do it. First question. Okay. Are you a designer? If so, like, what's your niche now that you've kind of learned some design skills?
I am a self-made designer, I would say. So that means I'm scrappy. And my niche would be designing for growth.
Love it. What's one trend in marketing that you're bullish on?
I'd say my marketing trend that I'm bullish on has got to be content.
Love it. Love it. We love that one. That's our favorite for sure. And what's the best thing you've bought under $100?
Oh, that one's easy. Skittles.
I love that. Skittles. Okay. That's a first for the producers. We got to mark this one. Skittles. What is one brand you're loyal to besides IDEO?
I'm a loyal Apple fan. It's crazy. I mean, to the point where my kids, they're like, "Mom, we don't need the new iPhone." And I'm like, "Yes, we're going to get it. We're going to get it the day that it's released."
That's awesome. I love it. Okay, last question. What is your best advice for a first-time CMO?
Best advice for a first-time CMO is, nourish yourself. Keep yourself nourished.